Awesome. Welcome, everyone who has tuned in. Welcome to Stories and Conversations with Rahel. I know it's been a minute since you saw content from me, but I'm glad to be back and looking forward. So looking forward to just having this conversation and looking forward to have you guys join in, interact with me, engage with me, tell me what you've been up to, tell me what's been up. And definitely this conversation that we have planned for today is such a powerful conversation. It's a topic that has been on my mind for such a long time. And I know I got some DMs asking me, why are you doing this, Rahel, and why now? And I mean, it's November, so it's International Men's Month. I hope I got it right. And it's also No Shape November, where there's a highlight on men, mental health, and also prostate cancer. And I decided to take one of the areas, which is mental health. And you guys know I'm very passionate about mental health. So I decided to bring in this other gender that we love so much to have this conversation, to demystify some of the things that, we see either on social media or we see around us in our environment, around what men go through when they are dealing with mental health. I'm sure some of you have had relatives or people around you who have expressed some of the mental health issues that they have, but probably not in an open way, because we know men, especially African men, do not like speaking about the challenges that they go through. We like being strong all the time, right? But yeah, this conversation is for every man out there who has had an experience with this particular challenge, a mental health challenge, or even the women who are around them, because we as women need to understand the men around us a little bit better, because we know men love being strong. We know men obviously love putting their best foot forward with everything that they do. But I believe this conversation is so important right now. And I'm glad to have two gentlemen with me who will definitely break down this conversation a little bit further, more than we even know. And we'll talk about different things around even childhood wounds, right? Some of the things that show up, or some of the behaviors that show up when men are affected by um, wounds that emanate from their childhood. So stay with us, guys. Please send in the questions. Send in every question that you might have. I know this topic is very, very sensitive. So if you want to directly message me, please do. If you want to send a DM to any of our social media channels, send those messages and we'll definitely answer them even after this live session. And remember, this is Stories and Conversations with Rahel. This is a podcast where we talk about untold stories, motivational stories, have powerful conversations around the topic of leadership, around mental health, around different topics that I'm really passionate about. And this is one of them. So welcome everyone once again. I really hope you'll enjoy this conversation. So without much further ado, I want to welcome my guest speakers, or my guest host or co-host. I don't know what to call them, but the guys who will be joining me on this particular conversation. So I'll start with my friend who I met a while back, and we've created such an amazing bond in terms of the conversations that we have, Dr. Moses Macharia. And he's really, really passionate about emotional and mental health, not just for men, but also for women. So holistically, and he does this a lot. Like, he has these conversations with men and women in the workplace. So he's definitely one of the best people, or he has enough knowledge, I believe, to share with us and to have this conversation with us. So Dr. Moses, welcome. I know I'm not doing a good introduction, but I'm sure you will share with us all the details about you, and we'll definitely like to know you a little bit better. So please go ahead, introduce yourself, and let us know a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Rael. I think you have done actually a good job in introducing me, but I'll just echo a few things. I am in the mental health space, particularly organizational wellness. And what I look towards is creating superstar employees through addressing mental health challenges and issues that may erupt from the workplace. Above that, I love doing work around the area of trauma and helping individuals navigate the various traumatic events that they may have encountered. You realize a lot of mental health challenges begin from when we were young, and they set in around when we are getting into teenage. And so journeying with people back from the past into the present, that's my day-to-day job. And I am so thrilled to be having this conversation, because it's a conversation that we have had on the side. And I think it's about time that we have this conversation even more for men to be able to come out and seek support and seek help, because it's readily available, and we need to show them that we are here to actually give you that as an experience. I am stationed out at Ntimsidai Wellness Center. That's where I currently am sitting at. Asanteni sana, and looking forward to an engaging conversation.
Karibu sana, Dr. Macharia, definitely representing all the men out there. So thank you for doing this. It's not easy, but we thank the Lord that you have obviously the courage to share your experiences, as well as sharing your own professional expertise and professional knowledge around this particular conversation. So thank you for being with us. And the one and only Dr. Nelson Aseri, you're a doctor. You know, I want to do this protocols observed thing, right? I do not want to be chased away from this room. So it's Dr. Nelson Aseri. Thank you for joining us. You are a psychotherapist, and you've done a lot of work also in the mental health space, and you support both men and women. But I mean, feel free to share with us a little bit more about yourself. And Dr. Moses, you didn't tell us whether you have a wife, you're married, you have children, but we'll get to that, because I mean, this whole topic around mental health and men will definitely demystify the area of relationships, the area of entrepreneurship, and just generally. So Nelson, over to you. Please introduce yourself a little bit more. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rahel. As you said, Nelson Aseri is my name, psychologist. Currently, I've been involved with several activities, co-chairing the mental health task force at Maimahiu after the floods that happened and costed the lives of our community. I'm also the director of counseling at Nairobi Chapel Ngong Road, interfusing faith and counseling. And other than that, I'm also an author. I do articles for the Daily Nation once a month, as well as a speaker in different spaces. I love working with men as well as ladies, and it's a pleasure to contribute and to be part of No Shave November, dedicated to men. Thank you.
Yes. Welcome, and I'm glad to have you here. And I mean, the same sentiments that I shared with Dr. Moses. I'm glad you are the representation of men for this particular conversation. And I know there are a lot more out there, but I'm glad that you obviously heeded the call. You accepted my call, and we are sitting here today. So we'll get right onto the conversation, because I know we have a lot to talk about. So the way we'll do this, I will be asking questions, because I mean, I need to share some of the things that I understand from my own perspective around mental health and men. But the way we'll structure this is I will be asking questions to these gentlemen, and then we'll just have a conversation around it. So, Dr. Moses, what are the said, unsaid, or unspoken mental health challenges that men face? And I mean, why I'm saying unsaid and unspoken is because of what I alluded to earlier. Men do not speak about their issues. Men always want to be revered or looked at as strong men, like they don't have issues, right? They are providers, they're protectors, so they want to always have that armor around them of a protector and a provider, especially in the African societies. But they go through a lot, and we've had a lot of stories about men committing suicide, both family men and also men who are not in families, men in business and all that. So what are these unsaid or unspoken mental health challenges that men face? And as you answer the question, you can probably touch on some of the behaviors that are exhibited by men when they are facing the mental health challenges.
That's actually a very good question, Rael. And I totally agree. Men face quite a range of challenges that some are spoken, some are unspoken. I know one of the things as an African man and in an African context, placing this actually in our context, one of the things that we quickly pick is the fact that you are not able to show vulnerability. And that's something that's, both unspoken and spoken, where I remember growing up, if you would shed a tear as a man, you were considered a weakling. And so you were told things like, you shouldn't cry, you should learn to toughen up, and things like that. And so when you would experience, for example, rejection in a relationship, ungeambiwa kitu kama mwanaume ni kujikaza. For those who are not non-Swahili speakers, it just basically means jikaza. Yes, brave on. And these are some of the things that are unspoken. Number two, I would say work and financial stress. Rarely would you find a man sharing issues that entail work or finance, especially if they have portrayed a particular kind of a lifestyle. They will always try and maintain that lifestyle. And so the anxieties that come from that will always affect this man. And sometimes we need to be vulnerable enough to share. Loneliness and isolation is something I've noticed with lots of men in our generation, where as a man, you are isolated. I look at, and a quick statistics for our viewers and listeners those who are listening in today. How many times do our father figures get isolated and they were put in this category as just providers? And so as long as they paid school fees, they ensure that there was food, then his work is done. And no one wanted to know how they are actually faring, or what are some of the challenges that this man is battling. And from then, we are able to see these individuals probably had no outlet, because they sort of resorted to sitting with their feelings, being alone and just chilling and dealing with these things that they were dealing with. And with that, we see also men who struggle to conform to masculinity. And there is toxic masculinity. Our other gender, now that we are talking in two genders, always speaks highly of this toxic masculinity. And that simply says men find pressure, and there is a lot of stereotype when it comes to masculinity and what it entails being an authentic man. And what is happening over the past 5 years, thereabout 5, 7, almost 10 years, we have seen a rise. And I'll touch on a sensitive matter, and I think we should actually debunk on this even today, where we see a rise of single mothers, and we have seen children who are raised by women and have zero model to model for them what it really means to be a man. This is an issue that is on steep curve, and it's rising here, not only here in Nairobi, I would say both here in Kenya and globally. And it's posing a big threat, because it poses men who grow up not knowing what is expected of them as a man. And so quickly, I would pick these as issues that are both, I know you dwelt on unspoken, but I'll say both unspoken and some can be spoken, especially like the vulnerability. A mountain people are calling vulnerability, that they have to expose themselves. So sometimes you may pick that. Yeah.
That, I mean, you're sharing some amazing wisdom. But I mean, let me just put a spanner in the works, right? Because this is out there in the society, and definitely we need to talk about it. Um, Normally, and I see this on social media and even from, around my environment, when you hear people speaking, they say men who express their emotions and these feelings of deficiency when they have mental health challenges, they say they are called simps, for lack of a better word, right? And if
Yeah,
anyone,
yeah,
yeah, if anyone gets that label, they feel so, now the deficiency even goes even down, right? Like
yeah,
they feel so insufficient. They feel like, oh my gosh, what can I do to recover? And
yeah.
come back to this place where mwanaume ni ndovu kuu.
Yes, yes.
So I think maybe talk about that a little bit and talk about the labeling, especially when these things come up. Because let me tell you, seeing a man cry, even for me as a woman who has healthy or wants healthy relationships around her, when I see a man cry, for me it's amazing, but there's also like, oh my gosh, what's going on. So just talk about that labeling and also feeling not open enough to actually be in a space where you can, like for me as a woman, saying it openly, like how do you navigate through that as a man? And how do you show up and say, okay, I'm actually going through a mental health challenge, even without the labels?
Wow, I think that's quite interesting. A generation of men who wear their emotions by the sleeves, and the labeling. Labeling, it's quite something that we need to navigate away from. And for anyone who's listening in, my encouragement to you is, how do we stop stigma around mental health issues? Is by you and me shunning away from labeling and actually celebrating people who are seeking help and finding help. I am digressing. Back to the question. And this labeling issue, it cuts by both genders. I've seen individuals who struggle with the stigma that comes around with labeling, not just men but even women. But for men, I think it has a higher impact, because as an African man, I am built out to be a tough man. As you say, Ndovuku, I'm able to move mountains and nothing can move me. But truly, looking deeply into the heart of the issue, we realize that things can move you. There is issues such as unresolved childhood trauma, which will always be triggered due to something that has happened in your current day and age, which will affect you as a man. So I think one of the biggest challenge, as you mentioned, around the area of labeling, it's one of the things that men need to do quickly is actually identifying who they are, number one. Number two, being knowledgeable over, why am I seeking this help? Is it for others or is it for me? And if it's for me, then I need to be okay with my truth and what others think as the truth. You see, today, Rahel, seated here, your truth remains to be your truth, and my truth remains to be my truth. And my truth will always anchor and direct me to the path that I need to go. But with that comes a big challenge. If I really don't know who I am, if my self-esteem is not really built out to 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 withstand the very tough nature that will come with the various challenges that life poses for us as men, particularly, then I'll be swayed. Then I'll find myself in that space of questioning life and what it truly means. And so, quickly, as you navigate through your healing process, dealing with your traumas, one of the things I always tell men is, let's build around our self-esteem and who we really are. I think that's the best place to start from, because I mean, everyone is going to talk, and if people are not talking, then there is a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you're sharing. And Dr. Nelson, I mean, the society definitely plays a huge role. And society obviously starts with the family. And Dr. Moses shared a very, very good example about when you're growing up as a boy, when you fall down, you're told, don't cry, usilie. Amka, when delay, it's like nothing has happened to you, right? So all these things or all these behaviors sometimes stem from, our families and the values that are taught in our families, and especially in African households. So what are some of the things that you've seen, even as you counsel men around this area of mental health, which it doesn't come out really outrightly from the word go, but you've seen it in the society and it has become a theme in the society that has been normalized, because majority of these things have been normalized?
Yeah, thank you. All these things in the society have been normalized, and I'll touch about a few because the society plays a very big idea and big plays a big role in this idea of strength is typically associated with stoicism or independence or emotional restraint. And I think one of the things that I have come to see in the counseling spaces I have been, especially when it comes to men, there is a great degree of emotional suppression. And I feel men have been conditioned to view emotions, for example, like sadness, anxiety, or fear, as weakness. And so as a result, many of them push down those emotions than processing, rather than processing them in healthy ways. And so all these make these men get into very high explosive degrees of anger, depression, and even anxiety. The second thing I have seen is the reluctance in seeking help. And the reluctance in seeking help is such a big stigma, and it is high compared to men, men compared to women. Women have a higher degree of seeking help than men, and all these comes from the societal messages such as self-sufficient. Kukua mwanaume ni kutosha mboga, things like those, yeah. And so most of the time, you see that when men come to seek help, it is because they have literally gone to the dead end of that situation and there is nothing else to be done. And the other thing is also there is also the increased risk of probably harmful coping mechanisms. Yeah. So when all these expectations are put down and the society pushes these expectations to men, the increased risk for harmful coping mechanisms increases. And most of the time, you'll find when a man is coming to seek for counseling, you'll find that they are either coping in addictions like alcohol. It could be drugs such as weed or marijuana, mira, and all that, and engaging in negative outcomes like gambling, relationship issues, and such kind of that. And so when all these have been the picture of the man when they stand in the mirror of their mental health, they see all these things, then until at that particular space is when you'll see men coming out to seek help. And I feel all this is as a result of the society. The other one is internalized shame and low self-esteem, because when men experience all these things, the societal expectations of strength that the society expects them to show causes them to experience shame when they can't show it up, to experience guilt and a sense of inadequacy, and this worsens their mental health conditions and increases the risk of suicide. And finally, I think the last one is um, physical health. Yeah. Sometimes all these struggles the society puts on the men, the things the society puts on the men, you find it impacts or causes their physical health to be always going down and down. You find people are not eating properly, thinking a lot. They are not exercising. They are not even drinking water. And I always share that when you drink and hydrate, what you hydrate yourself, the brain is suspended into a fluid level that is required, and that fluid level in the brain or in the skull helps reduce irritability, which has been proven scientifically to cause anger levels to be high. And so when these physical health issues begin to reflect up, it begins just to show the kind of space the society has with men. And I think one of the things that Daktari said is the aspect of vulnerability. And I always add on to it that until we get out from a place where we allow men to be vulnerable in their thoughts, how are they thinking? To allow their thoughts be acceptable in how they are thinking, that I am inadequate and I need help. And also, how are they feeling? Be vulnerable with their feelings, yeah? Such as, I feel sad. Why? I have lost a loved one. I have lost a marriage. And to allow them process their sadness, not as a weakness, but also as a place of accepting them, and also allowing them process their actions, such as actions such as probably I have not eaten, or I have gone and retreated to drug and substance abuse. And so acknowledging that action alone and allowing them to be vulnerable, it's not a sign of being weak, but it's a sign of the small progress and steps required in moving forward to helping men break out from where the society has caused them to get into.
Wow. I'm actually learning quite a bit, especially on the alcohol part, right? We see a lot of men suffering with substance abuse, especially alcoholism. And sometimes we term that as huyo tu ako hivo vile, ako tu hivo. Ama if probably it runs in the family, you start saying it's something that is in the family. So this is definitely because of this. But I think if we, and this is what you're saying, if we investigate it a little bit more, you might find out it's actually a mental health challenge going on. But let me ask, actually, both of you, there are these positive reinforcements we see in the society, and I'm talking about the African society because that's the primary society that we're in, especially around machoism, like, this guy is macho, he always mwambia kitu and all that. I mean, what can you say about that? Because I know we'll talk about narcissism and all that, but what do you talk about, or how would you say, there are some positive reinforcements that we are seeing in the society, but they are actually not good signs, or rather they are signs that we need to look out for that might be as a result of mental health decline or even an inadequacy in a man, right? What are those things that have been normalized positively, right, that we need to look out for? Maybe we can start with you, Nelson, then we go to Dr. Moses.
Some of the things that I think need to be looked out for, I think it depends the society we are in, and the reinforcements, I would term them probably as negative reinforcements professionally, looking at them, that the society probably views them as positive. Allow me to share these because it will also be part of what I'll unpack. There are proven 5 mental health pandemics in Nairobi. And the first one is alcoholism. The second one is gambling. The third one is weed or marijuana use. And the fourth one is sex. And the fifth one is loneliness. But out of research, we realized that the 4 are all grounded on this loneliness, which is the fifth one. And now, which helps us to begin to unpack it out, looking through it. And some of the negative, positive reinforcements that people have been told is figure out life. The essence of life has moved away from the quality of the person to the quality of success, and not realizing that the quality of the person is the utmost or primary success before achieving secondary success of probably wealth and all that. And so I think the reinforcement of pushing people to achieve everything, that's why we have seen many people have achieved and have jumped out from story buildings in posh places that are there that we know, and left their cars, their families, and everything because they are battling from within. And so I think that positive, negative reinforcement of probably pushing people into the secondary levels of success rather than the primary levels of success, not watching over their quality as individuals, is one of the things that I would address. The second thing is that the place I would say is there is a phrase that is usually used that when you reach the age of 30, you are now the background. But in real sense, when we look at the background, is not the age of 30, it's our childhood. And we have been focused to think through about the future without looking through the past. So the other negative is you cannot change anything in the past. So you move on. But the past within you can change, you are moving in that regard. And so one of the things that I have seen as a negative response is neglecting the past and people being pushed, just collect yourself and move into the future. Allow me to throw in a small scripture story that I love explaining. In John chapter 4, we see a good story, Jesus and the woman at the well. The woman at the well is there. Jesus asked the woman at the well, give me a drink. Jesus tells, the woman says, what do we Jews have to do? What do Jews have to do with Samaritans? And immediately I sense a level of abandonment, rejection being enhanced in that particular space. And when I went back to history, I realized that the Samaritans were neglected. They were abandoned from building the temple, from even entering the temple to worship. And they were amongst the people that were affected by the exile. When Israelites were going to exile, they remained, and they called a city that they remained in Samaria. And when the guys came back from exile, they welcomed them. But when it came to building the temple, they were told you can't build because you are not part of the genealogy records that we found while we were in exile. And so over time, they did not visit the temple. And so they did not live a quality life because they could not hear the teachings and they could not hear the words of wisdom that were being said. And so their quality of life compared to obedience to God's word compared to the Jews was lacking. And there was that enmity between that. But their hope was that at one point or the other, we will be liberated. And the conversation changes from the water at the well to living water. And when the woman says that, give me this water so that I may not thirst again, Jesus begins to be a psychologist and says, go call your husband. And the woman is like, I don't have any. And Jesus is like, even the one that you have is not yours because you've had 5. And the woman is like, the conversation shifts from just a place of now the pain and the kind of life, the quality of life the woman has been living in the place of rejection and abandonment. And now the solution is prescribed when Jesus says that a time is coming where the Father will look for true worshippers in true and in spirit. And the woman is like, we are waiting for that person so that we can worship him, called the Messiah. And Jesus tells him, the one speaking to you is him. And the woman leaves everything and goes to a whole city, because that city was a generation. It was the city of Samaria, which was suffering the same problem of abandonment. And Jesus spent there 2 days talking to them to heal this psychological trauma over generations carried to them, so that they may get back to the place of quality worship, to be able to live life, heal the people, and healed Christians and believers to partake into the promise that God has it for them. And so when you look at it on this context of life and how it is on this side, it is the same situation that we neglect the past. We don't want to know the history of how our backgrounds have been. And so in our abandoning of our past, our past multiplies its effect through us. And not unless we also seek help, or sometimes psychologists meet us at the well or counselors meet us at the well, it will be very difficult to unveil and heal the traumas that have happened. And so for me, that will be some of the things that I think my top 2, looking behind the negative pushings or things that have been placed before men to look through as they assess their mental health journey.
Ooh, I'm here saying, oh my gosh, this is literally a Sunday sermon, Nelson. We really, really need to hear. We need to hear more about this, and this needs to be spoken about more often than it is right now. Oh my goodness, that story about the woman at the well, that is new for me, but definitely um getting the mark or catching on to obviously what we're talking about. Dr. Moses, what about you? And I know this obviously is a big area for you, especially for entrepreneurs, organizations, and all that. And I think Dr. Nelson mentioned one thing that really caught my attention, which is overworking, right? Being over busy. So maybe tell us also this about these positive reinforcements that are there in the environment that you're in and with some of the clients that you have seen, and they are being normalized, and yet they are areas of danger for men.
When we were talking about loneliness and isolation, one of the key things that actually men resort to do is hide in their work, because they find safety by being overly busy. And so they choose to live life on the fast lane. This can be a trauma response as well, because they may be addressing a deeper part of their lives also, because they connotate success to validation. And I think Nelson has echoed this, where I was never celebrated by my father. And so I will work hard for him to say, you're doing good. You are being an ideal man. And so those are some of the things I get to see, even with entrepreneurs. They will always struggle with this thing called success because they have a point to prove. But who are you proving this point to? Mostly you'll find you're proving that point to yourself as a man. It's not to your father. It's not to the society who told you you won't succeed simply because you put up few ventures and you had to close shop. If you're an entrepreneur and you've never failed, bado. I have the audacity to say bado, because once you start a business and you fail, you get to learn a lot, and you're able to pick these lessons and, put them in your toolkit and use them to propel yourself forward. Some of the other cognitive bias that I got to see is something that we do as Africans. We have a conflict at home, just sweep it under the rug, it will disappear. And after a short while, it becomes a huge mountain that we have to actually unveil the rug and deal with each and every single one of these issues. And it's never good. It's actually a nasty, nasty experience. Fake it till you make it. You have to wing it. Just wing it. Hey, nayo, tembea nayo, skuma tu, mbele. And this is something that's affecting men of younger generation. Right now, you see resiliency has dipped simply because we have to put up a show. Social media has become a big thing. And so I want to show my peers that kuna vile I'm getting it. One thing I'm learning about life is life has various sides of it. And as a man, I need to embrace that. In my head, I might have thought I'll be successful. You know how we go to Campo, you go to Campo, you work hard, you get into this amazing career, you're doing medicine, and then you are done. And then the government says, hello, kidogo tembea kwa streets hapo ukiprotest haki yetu. Ujue pia kuna watu protest. It's crazy. Because your idea of success, your idea of making it might not be as how you perceived it to be. And so people need to actually slow down and be gracious to themselves. It's a negative thing that you have to fake it till you make it. Be authentic, be you. There is so much value in who you are as an individual rather than what you desire other people to see. And so for most clienteles, one of the exercises that I get to do with in this space is the Johari window. And part of that is individuals celebrating men and telling them part of themselves that they had no clue about. there is one controversial one which echoes to what Nelson has already spoken about, and he talked about, drugs and substance abuse as a coping mechanism. And one of the things that men say is therapy happens in the bar, or therapy happens by doing something that I love. So that might look like, and I'm sorry, guys, my son is calling me here. It's part of being a man. All right. So, part of that is, sorry about that. That therapy happens in a form of self-care. And so for men, it might be going to the barbershop, and as you get a haircut, you're able to share out. At the bar, that's a place that men love to go and debunk. Or I will take my bike and go for a ride into the winds, and I'll feel the breeze, and I'll feel like I have offloaded things. That is not therapy. Therapy is going to a professional who will help you navigate through various kinds of issues that you are facing in a professional way, and help you through directing you to dealing with each and every of these cases, rather than a famous question that we always get, wow, pole sana bro, sasa tutadu. That's not therapy. That's not therapy. A therapist will take and unpack everything in a professional manner and help you and guide you in finding help. So, Rael, lots of negative things are happening. And I can say here in Nairobi, a lot of negative ideas and ideations have been thrown out. And some, I call them pop psychology, and Instagram and other social medias have been doing a good job at that. Sometimes you need to separate yourself. You need to unplug and connect with these things. Sit down with your feelings, sit down with the emotions, sit down with the thoughts, with someone who can actually help you navigate through that.
Man, you guys, I am learning, I'm learning so much. And as I said, I'm not doing this for any other purpose, but for the men around me, my brothers, my uncles, everyone that surrounds me, who's a man, also at work, and the men that I associate with, partners and all that, because we see so many behaviors, and sometimes we are not able to demystify or actually put reason to what these guys are doing. And there's some things that you guys have mentioned that has just confirmed some of the things that I have seen with a lot of men around me, including family members, right? And one that you mentioned that is so significant, and I think it's practiced by so many men, and I saw this my dad actually doing this, is sweeping things under the rug or throwing money to the problems, right? Tumekosana, so wacha niwapeleke out. We will not talk about all that. So he will do something nice so that we just forget about it and move on. But with time, you realize like it's actually a wound that forms over time, and if it's not taken care of, it shows up in your adult life. Man, guys, this is really important, and I'm glad that we are having this conversation. And for the ones who just joined, we are having this conversation around men and mental health, understanding some of the general mental health concerns that men face, just generally, whether it's in their family, in relationships, at work, anywhere around their environment. And we are having now this conversation around how men identify, or rather, how can you identify some of the things that actually men go through and they don't talk about them? So the unspoken things that men have or face in their lives, and some of the main causes of these challenges. And later on, we'll be speaking about how we can support men as women who are in their lives, and even for men themselves, because I believe self-deliverance or self-development, or however you'd call it, it starts from yourself. Like, you have to start it. You're the one to actually start the journey by yourself, but you have to realize all these things and then start the journey of healing. So time is actually going, but I mean, this conversation is really important, and I want to touch on one key element that I know is something that, again, people are asking on my inbox around some of the emotional issues that come up, or mental health issues that come up as a result of father or mother wounds. So Dr. Nelson, maybe share with us some of the things from your professional experience or professional expertise around this, around father and mother wounds, because we don't talk about this a lot. I know women talk about this a lot, especially when it comes to daddy wounds and all that, but men also face father and mother wound or childhood wounds. So how do they show up, and how can you identify that this man or this husband of mine or this friend of mine or brother of mine is actually going through a challenge that stemmed out of an emotional wound from their childhood?
Thank you. Allow me to begin by saying that an average father in an average family in Nairobi spends about 15 minutes with their families a week. An average father in Nairobi spends 15 minutes with the family a week. So you could probably do the mathematics and see how much time do they spend with the family in the week. But now, moving to the question that you have asked, I think there are several ways that one of the things that I've come to do with my clients is to help them draw what I call a family tree. A family tree. And a family tree simply is a family history that is able to show a level of similarity, or to bring out information that one did not be able to perceive that this information is there. So many people don't know how to map out their life stories. So if you told someone, tell me your life story, they do not know where to begin. Most of the time, people will focus on the achievements rather than the low things that they have done. And for me, the first thing is to establish, one, how was your founding, how was the foundation of your family? Because the greatest place where father wounds and mother wounds happen is at the foundational level. And let me say this clear and loudly, that the greatest form of abuse to a child is not physical abuse, it is not even sexual abuse, it is not even emotional abuse, it is abandonment and rejection. That one is the hugest. And it does a lot of things to someone's brain. The brain has executive functions that help us to function, such as planning, thinking, communicating, judgment, and many others. And so the first way I identify all these things is, one, by checking if there is a symptom of abandonment in the life of an individual, and probably look at the consistency of how has the abandonment reoccurred in their life. And also checking family time, because that is the first place of wounds being formed. The thing is, sometimes they might not be experienced in childhood, but when you grow up, the gaps begin to see, because now you need your executive functions more as an adult as compared to when you are a child. And so all these things begin to affect an individual as they grow up. So the first one is seeing the level of abandonment. And now that one leads to the second thing, which is attachment. Checking the attachment styles of people. There is secure attachment style and there is insecure attachment style. And people who have secure attachment style will seek help, will be vulnerable in a healthy way, compared to people who have insecure attachment styles. They have a lot of trust issues. They cannot be able to keep relationships and form relationships, and they always mask it all in. And so knowing or investigating the attachment styles of people, because when a man or young teens that men come into the session and you begin to run assessment tests around attachment, you begin to see patterns that are there. And the funny thing is, compared to attachment styles of women, men have very insecure attachment styles compared to women. And probably that would inform how relationships cannot be kept right now, and the rate at which the family unit is also not stable. We also have the place of high expectation someone living in a place of high expectation because of the kind of demand they had while they were children. And so unconsciously, someone picked up the mental tendencies of their parents and they continued in them. And sometimes it can lead to isolation, which is also another symptom of seeing how these tendencies affect people or begin to make them not to experience life wholly. And I always probably allow me to share this with isolation, that someone is in a home and sees how their mother has abused their father, not cared for them while they were sick, and this person says, I will never ever get into a relationship again. And so based on that particular space, it is from a place of deep experience and from a place of deep trauma that they are coming from. And when they would probably speak it publicly, we might dismiss it because they have not come into. But if you go to their wild, they are protecting a child in them that needed to be cared for, but has never found a security or a secure environment to be cared for. And so the defensive mechanism employed is, I will never get to this because I will be hurt in this particular space. And lastly, lastly is abuse. Abuse, looking at the history of abuse in the life of an individual. Remember, all these things we look into the past so that we can be able to heal the present and set you up for a better future that is there. Going back to the past and trying to see what are the spaces of or the history of abuse, what are the history of emotional manipulation, what are the history of neglect that has been there over and over again, what is the history of criticism that has also been there, and inconsistent parenting as well that has been there, and also emotional abuse that has been there. So when all these things we have looked into them, it helps to see that you are a wounded soldier and you need not to take your gun and get to the war, but first retreat into the medical camp and get treatment so that you can be prepared for war. And one thing I know is that there is no people who know how to fight war better than soldiers who are wounded and have their scars that are healed, because they will always prevent another soldier from getting a scar like that of their own. So I think for me, that is one of the things, or some of the things that I would probably speak that we get to look into when we look and interact with men, and to always normalize how do we hear and listen to people. When men begin to speak, what are they leaving out? Some people leave out their families. Some people leave out of the conversations about their early childhood, about their primary schools and all that. And so in our listening also, we need to be very active to get to know what is someone leaving out, and to hear that, and to be able to call them aside and say, we've noted you don't talk about your family. Is there any reason that you prefer not to speak about your family? And if you find I have intruded your space, please pardon me. It's just from a place of care and concern for you. So that helps at least inform people that this is a safe environment and I can be heard. And so it is upon us to practice active listening, to know what is being not said, and also to extend our knowledge around the same. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, and I like the fact that you've talked about emotional unavailability, emotional manipulation, and all that. So, Dr. Moses, as you're answering this question as well, because I'd love to hear your perspective, maybe you can share it in a way that, for myself, who's a leader in the workplace and I am leading men, or I have partners who are men, or I am a wife and I see my husband exhibiting certain behaviors. What are these behaviors? Because I know people talk a lot about, right now, it's like a buzzword, narcissism and gaslighting and all that stuff. So how do these wounds show up? Because I think this is one area we need to really debunk. And I know we don't have the time to do it right now to the level that we want to, but maybe from a very simple place, or in the way you'll answer this question, maybe tell us, how do these emotional, or rather these wounds show up and affect men's mental health, and then it is exhibited in relationships, at home, in the workplace, and in the environments that they're in?
I think you've already answered the question, and part of where these emotions may show up is, as you said, in their workplace, in their relationships, in their families, as they continue to socialize in the society. You will get to see some funny characters. I have to have my to join a particular club simply because of status. And so these things you'll get to see as a trend. And as Nelson has shared, and I will just echo on the same, most of these things are deep work from when you are a child. And so one of the things that I have quickly done with founders and entrepreneurs has been to really engage your inner child and dive deep and actually try and debunk what happened. How was your childhood? What are some of the ideologies that were sold to you as a child? Because that comes to play. I always say that a founder and their organization, actually an organization is 100% the DNA of the founder. And so there is a lot that is at stake with a founder being healthy, a founder being a person who prioritizes mental well-being. You want to go into a toxic work environment, I kid you not, when you find one and you try to find the root cause and you really look deep to this particular founder, you'll realize he is actually the toxic one. And so it's just trickling down the entire food chain. Just to say. So some of the things I've been able to notice, restructuring some of the truths that were sold to us as truth as a child. I recently saw a joke that says, those prayers that our mothers used to make that were non-doctrinal, and our fathers, they had so much power, and unlike these current ones of God Almighty. It's just the same thing. There is a lot of things that we were sold as children in terms of excellence, in terms of work, some which are good, some which are not good. And for a person to become a narcissist, there is a lot of things that has gone through their life, in their life experience. And when you try to unpack, you'll be able to see some of these things. I would like to echo something Nelson has said, and that's actively listening. Listen to understand, listen to see, because there is a lot that people come with, and sometimes they are both spoken and unspoken. We need to create an experience for people to be able to unpack, but also we need to allow individuals to be able to reframe their minds, their cognitive thinking, and change some of the core beliefs that they've had, and move towards a place of healing, a place where they get to appreciate who they are. So in organizational setup, this is something that we get to see. As you said, it will always pop up in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on what you guys have said, I think majority, and I believe majority of the issues that we have, especially in our adult lives, are because of our childhood. So it's always good to go back and reflect and see what has happened in the past that has not been resolved and is actually showing up as a certain behavior. And even when you're encouraging us to listen, even these men need to listen to what they're being told in terms of some of the patterns that they have. Because, I mean, you guys are sometimes you can be stubborn, right? And especially when it comes from the other gender being told that you're like this and like that, you don't want to hear it because, again, you guys have this mentality of being strong and knowing that, everything that you're doing is actually good. great, or however you might call it. So I think also listening to the patterns that are being shared. When you're in a relationship, it breaks, you go to another one, it breaks. There's something definitely wrong with you, and you need to keep on reinvestigating and reanalyzing yourself to see what those things are and how you can deal with them. And I'm actually glad now we are coming to this part of resolution, right? And if you're joining us either on Zoom or on YouTube, we are having this conversation around men and mental health. This is a No Shave November series, and we have Dr. Nelson and Dr. Moses as a guest talking about the areas of challenges that men face. So how you can support Stories and Conversations with Rahel, subscribe to our YouTube page, and we'll definitely have more conversations like this. And this is how this conversation, through subscription and sharing and liking, this is how it reaches, this conversation reach out to even more and more people, because this is a very, very important conversation, and we need to support men more than we are doing. I know there's this debate going around that the girl child has been empowered so much until there are no men to actually either get into relationships with them or relate with them, or however you might call it. So we need to bring the men along even as we go on this journey. So really glad to have you guys on the live. And if you'll watch this later on, again, to support us, share, subscribe, and like this video. So we've gotten to the place of resolution, right? And I'd love us to talk about how men can actually start opening up. A lot of men, again, do not open up. And right now, because of the mental health scourge and people committing suicide at really high rates, and all these things happening around our workplaces, in relationships, the divorce rate is so high right now. And I'm not sure if mental health is one of the causes of this, but you guys can share your opinion about that. So what are the steps that men can actually take to start healing? And I know we've talked about active listening on both sides of the scale, right? But what are the other steps, practical steps that men can actually take to start healing? And Dr. Nelson, we can start with you. And as you talk about that, you can talk about when these men start taking these steps, how can we support them as family members, as a community, as a society, as girlfriends, as wives, as sisters, however, or whichever relationship we have with these men? How do we support them so that they continue expressing themselves without judgment?
Thank you. Wow. Allow me to summarize it into three small parts. I would probably term it as the principles of healing, especially for men. The first one is availability. And under availability, there is availability of time. When you are sick, you create time to visit a doctor and go to the doctor for a diagnosis and all that. And so one of the things that as men need to do or to take up is to be available for their mental health, to create time for their mental health. And you see, sometimes, as Dr. Macharia said, that we have the lie of telling ourselves that when we are eating boozy or doing something, we are actually having therapy. It is a different thing when you go to a doctor and you are put under ultrasound to see beyond the skin into the deep organs and the veins of the body that are there. You cannot have such kind of a conversation while you are having a social alcohol catch-up. And so it is important to have intentional time to be able to seek professional help for men. And so that is one of the things that I would also say, availability of time. And under availability, there are many things. There is availability of time, there is availability of resources, because also mental health is needs money to finance your counseling sessions and all that. It requires money. And so if we can set out an insurance policy for a medical emergency, we can also get into a culture of setting out a fund towards your mental health. And I've seen families that have even contracted a family psychologist that every once a month they come and they walk through different issues a whole day, and the psychologist gets to be paid. And every member of the family contributes probably 2,000 to that kitty. And if there are 5 family members, everyone has given 2,000. You can get how much that is, and you spend a whole day and all that. And it helps people get to learn more about. So there is availability of resources. There is also availability of people, because again, there is an essence of one isolating on Google, on AI, on YouTube, trying to look for solutions. Many times we've gotten clients who come and tell us, please use CBT as a diagnosis for my issue. Please use realistic approaches. And so you're like, do you go to the doctor and tell the doctor, take me to the scar, take me? It is the doctor who knows. And so most of the time, it's important to know the quality of people that are available. Because again, the truth of the matter is not every counselor is dedicated and committed to their profession. We have scrupulous counselors, just the way we have scrupulous medical doctors that are masquerading, you know. And so it is important to have the eye to get quality people to help you around, to work with you around. And also the other thing is to be available for your journaling. Yeah, to be available for your journaling, because we always say it is men don't, it is a woman thing to journal. I have 5 of my journals. This is my second journal for the year, and I have almost like a bunch, more than 5 of them since 2017. And this year is the year that I've journaled the most. And so creating time to be available, to journal your experiences, to look through the things that are there in your past, and to see a plan and probably a historical order of how things are moving. You can predict to know this is the root of why this is coming here. And it will help you know how to create friendships, so that you have homogeneous friendship that speak into the areas of lack that you experience at that particular point. The second one is reliability. And reliability is the ability to be consistent in all the availabilities. Because one of the tragedies is that men come for, by the way, if you find a gentleman has been consistent in counseling more than 4 sessions, that one truly wanted counseling. Most men come for counseling 2 sessions and they think they are good and they go. And that's why I think when they come back, it's because they got into a relationship and a lady told them, you need to work on yourself, you need to see a therapist. Then they will remember that you are existing somewhere. Then they will come. And you see, they are not coming for themselves. They are coming for a primary or secondary party. And so it is important to be available, to be reliable, consistency in all that. Journaling once is good, but it's not good enough. Creating resources for your mental journey is good enough when you do it consistently. And then finally, it is the last one is vulnerability. And vulnerability, I always say, it is not congruent if it is not in thought, in feeling, and in action. So if someone says, I've been thinking how my marriage, what I did in my marriage for me to lose it, and I feel sad about it, and the action I'm taking it is I am apologizing to my ex-wife to know that I am uttermost sorry for the actions that I did. That vulnerability is congruent. But most of the time is you find people will be like, I think I did not do the right thing in my marriage. And they finish at that particular place. Their actions don't show that what they are thinking is congruent. They don't align those vulnerability sections. And so you find that the sweet spot of intimacy is not there among men and even among other general relationships. And so if men are not encouraged to be vulnerable, it becomes very difficult. And sometimes people say, how do you begin to be vulnerable? It is by just beginning. Like, how do you open a bottle of water? Open it up and drink the water. And sometimes you begin with slowly steps like a journal and begin putting your thoughts there. Then you'll gather the strength to go to a counselor or a psychologist and pour your heart out there. They will teach you the skills of vulnerability. They'll teach you the boundaries of vulnerability. They'll teach you all these things that as you continue doing life, you get into a place where you are a better man. You are always growing in everything. And also, as other people, as also the community surrounding men, we have to get into a culture of being honest and genuine. And how can we be doing that? We can celebrate progress in people. We can communicate with empathy with them. We can as well also ask genuinely and hit the nail where it's supposed to be. The question that I always ask people is, are you okay? Or how are you doing? And the general answer will pop up. I am good. But when I change and I ask, how are your finances? Then the conversation changes. And so we have to learn how to shift and to be intentional in how do we want to help men or to allow men to encourage them to be vulnerable. And also another thing is also to grow also ourselves in the place of intellectualism and recommend. Sometimes I have seen people buy books, ladies buy books. Let's say it's a book on boundaries, and they buy a book and they give the man. They have sorted a therapy session of probably 15 sessions with a book, and they ensure that they read together that book and they discuss and they write notes. And sometimes it will be probably watching a series that depicts a particular character of narcissism or something like that. And so all these things, it's important when we have people who have that broad-based mentality to share resources that can help men get out from the place of to get out from their place of insecurity and all that. And also cultivating purpose and meaning. Cultivating purpose and meaning is also helping each other cultivate purpose and meaning. There are three questions a man must answer. Who am I? That is identity. Whose am I? That is belonging or originality. And why am I here? That is purpose. And so it is important if we can be able to answer these, get into a question, and all these things bring us into the sweet spot of awareness. That when we are at our workplace, we have awareness. When we are at our family places, we have awareness. When we are by ourselves, we are also aware of all that is happening around us. And sometimes also for the people that surround us, patience and perseverance, because this is a journey. Patience and perseverance, it is a journey. Time does not change, time only reveals. So when we are patient with men, it is important to see how things are being revealed and unveiled. And I have seen many people do great things when marriages being transformed by sticking together and helping their man for 3 years. And after that, they are the ones who enjoy the fruit of that process. And the man himself is the one who enjoys the most of that fruit. So I will probably add on to those amongst many others that we can read from books. I can't exhaust everything, but in general, I would probably speak and share on those. But most importantly, let us not forget vulnerability, reliability, and availability. Those ones are very key. Thank you.
Well, that's like a drop mic situation right there. But thank you so much, Nelson, for that. And may I add, also acceptance. I think when you accept that you have a problem, that's when healing starts. So thank you for sharing those three main things that every man needs to do, which is availability, reliability, and vulnerability. Love it. Love it. Dr. Moses, I'm sure you can top that or add on to that as we end the session. I know we are past time. If you can add on to that, just share with us some of the things that men can actually start doing to start this process of healing or start opening up, and how we can support them as wives, girlfriends, mothers, sisters, the community and the society, and even the church. Yeah.
Mengi yamesemwa na mchungaji daktari amefunga kabisa, yani amemalizia tu kabisa. It's a good thing. I think the three really stand out, and vulnerability is everything. So I'll actually start from that. And for individuals who are in the business world, working in organizations, I always have this key thing that I always say, and I'll say it here again, that you need 4 people in your corner. You need a mentor, you need a coach, you need a peer who you can always unpack things with, and you need a therapist. So these 4 people create a community for you as a man. You cannot survive alone. I'll repeat, you as a man watching this cannot survive alone. You need a community. Human beings, we are highly social. And by us being social, we need people around us to thrive. I know the first two, the mentor and a coach, sometimes people get to confuse the two. But a mentor is someone who you check in, from probably quarterly. And some people might say, hey, would you mentor me? Yet they just mean a coach, someone who will, deal with the very daily things and help them navigate through issues on a daily basis. A mentor does much more so and bigger stuff rather than that. The everyday activity that a coach might do. So you need these 4 people, but also you need a peer, someone who you are in the same industry with, who you can unpack some of the challenges that you're going through, someone who can listen into you and support you and navigate through various challenges that you may experience in your work, you may experience in your relationships, and they really play a key role. Number 2, I'll say try therapy as a trial version. You know how we have trial versions for a couple of things? I want you to have this at the back of your mind, not therapy for therapy, but therapy as a trial. Say, I'll try it. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And what that ends up doing, it sort of removes that daunting thought of therapy for what it really is to something that is achievable, something that you can enjoy, something that you can try out and see how it looks like. Number 2, we need to reshape our cultural and social norms. We need to change our perception. We need to do life differently. And by that, I would encourage us to promote men's success more. I know we are coming from a time where the girl child had been elevated. We need to start elevating men, and successful men who are doing well in the society, men who are solution givers, and are doing mind-blowing things. Men who are amazing fathers. We need to celebrate fatherhood. We need to celebrate good marriages and say, this man leads a good marriage. And we need to bring this out to the limelight so that people can see and emulate. For us men, we follow models. What we see is what we do. So when something is modeled out in the right way, we will try and approach and do that. Having mental health education in schools and our workplaces. I cannot stress that enough, that we need to curate employee wellness programs in our organizations. And for organizational leaders who are listening in, that's a challenge to you, to human resource managers. Would you sit down with your team and carve out programs for our employees where they would find the relevant education around mental health, but even in schools, simply because we were taught as children that mwanaume ni kujituma, mwanaume ni effort. We can teach the essence of mental health education as early as when our children are in school. And so children can learn that it is okay for a man to actually seek help. It's okay for me as a man to be that number 3 that Nelson told us, vulnerable. And we can really share where we are at, what's happening to us without fear or shame or feeling of guilt because someone will think, na vile anakaanga poa. We can actually unpack that fully, and that these children can learn to be resilient truly, rather than what it's being purported by social media or what parents will try and shape up for these children. And number 3, I would say, and I would encourage you guys to seek out small steps in self-care routine. So what's your self-care routine? Yeah, I know at some point tumepiga vitu zingine like taking a ride out into the wind or driving. I have a friend who enjoys just driving out to Maimayo or Naivasha and getting into that art cafe and picking a cup of coffee and driving back to Nairobi. Maybe that's your form of self-care. Or for some, just like me, it might be going out to golf or going for a hike. I would encourage you to do that. But I will push it a bit further. And I will request that, can you do that with a couple of people? Bring other men along. One of the things I'm quickly learning is a program that I'm desiring to actually launch out. And that is going to the golf range with men who have no idea of how to golf, but we can go there, pick a golf stick and a golf ball and strike out and use that as a catharsis to just let go and let loose. Because men rarely get to do that. I have piloted that. I have seen the essence of that with men. And for you, it might be playing football with a bunch of friends. Do that. It might be putting nyama choma and choma in nyama and having candid conversations. One of the things I would request for you guys to do, even as you do that, is look for a therapist. I know you know of a therapist in your circle, preferably male, and bring them on board and let them help you guys unpack a couple of issues. Both Nelson and I, we have done a couple of those where we've been invited in and we get to share with men. They may have something in common, like, they sing in the same choir. And so they make the tenor and bass team of this particular choir. And we just get to invite them. They get to invite us and we get to share and we give them the professional elements of these things. The values of emotional intelligence would be my last one. Would you seek out to understand your emotions? And as a man, I know it's hard for even me sometimes to name the emotion, but I challenge you this week. Would you sit down with your emotions and don't term each and every one of them as stress, but try and figure out what is it really? And when someone tells you, hey, today you're angry, actually acknowledge and sit down with that and say, oh yeah, actually today I'm angry. Today I am behaving in a way that is not really right. What might be triggering that? And that will quickly help you navigate through various issues. So these are some of the things that you can quickly pick from us and implement. But as Nelson has said, there are lots of books and resources online that you can use and you can utilize to being the authentic self that God created you to be. There is a true version of you as a man that you need to tap into and start living your true calling. Do not conform to what others purport you to be. Conform and be what God created you to be as a man. Thank you.
Deep. Oh my goodness, you guys, you're sharing such gems today. And as I said, I know this conversation, we can't have it in one sitting. And that's why we have a series this whole month of November. And I hope you'll join us next week, same time, same place on YouTube and also on Zoom, where we can talk about all these things, right? We will really break it down. And I'm glad that Dr. Moses, you're walking this journey with me and Dr. Nelson as well. So thank you so much for sharing all these gems with us. And I really pray that a lot of men will come and actually get to listen to some of these things that you have shared, because this is what will get them to that place of healing. And men, men are leaders in the society and men are the essence of the society. So we need our men to be okay. We need our men to be healed up, to have, emotional intelligence, as you've mentioned. We want priests in our houses. We want to be led by men who understand themselves in purpose, right? So All these things can be done, and it's very, very easy. That's what I believe. And just as a challenge to you guys, because I mean, I am just the person hosting, and I'm listening to you guys because I'm also learning a lot, right? One challenge or two challenges that I want to throw back at you guys is you are the examples that we have in the society right now. You're two of many examples that we have, but those examples don't come out as often as we want them to come out, or they are not as big as the noise that is there, maybe on social media or on mainstream media, or whichever environment that you're in that influences you in one way or another. So I would like to challenge you guys to speak about this more often. I think for us women, it's a little bit easier because we'll just get a camera, we'll put on makeup, and we'll talk about this. But for men, it's a little bit, it takes a little bit more of pushing and all that. But imagine what you have just shared today. If that was just recorded on a phone and shared in bits and pieces, I'm sure a lot of men would actually grab onto some of these gems that you guys are sharing. And there'll be a lot more men willing to come out and sharing their experiences and finding healing. And then another challenge, especially in your profession right now, mental health is a big thing. And because I mean, a lot of people are realizing it's a big thing, they're capitalizing on it. And to be honest, not everyone can afford that 5K for a session. So how do you create platforms where men can actually come and open up? And I'm so glad, Dr. Moses, you're doing this gold thing. Sijui kama wataweza kuafford. We pray that they will be able to afford. But I'm glad that you guys are already thinking about these communities where men can come together and just have these conversations. Because sometimes when you're in a community and you hear someone else has a similar challenge to myself or to someone else, then it becomes easy for you to be vulnerable. And we talked about vulnerability. So those are the two challenges that I throw back at you guys. And we'll continue this conversation. So I know time has really gone. So I want to end this one for today. So thank you so much, Nelson Moses. I really, really appreciate your time. I really appreciate the wisdom that you've shared with us. And we are doing this not just to have a conversation at the end of a Wednesday night, not because we don't have anything to do, but it's because we have this conviction within ourselves that we need to put out these conversations and amplify them and have more men find healing and start that journey of healing. So thank you, gentlemen, and good night. Thank you.